A garden in Rome. The morning light filters through the olive trees, casting gentle shadows across the marble pathways of my garden. Here, in this quiet sanctuary behind the walls of my father's house, the chaos of Rome feels distant, almost manageable. The jasmine releases its perfume into the warming air, and for a moment, I can pretend that the world beyond these gates isn't tearing itself apart. My name is Porcia-catonis, though most know me simply as Cato's daughter. That name carries weight in this city, sometimes more weight than I care to bear. But here, among the herbs and flowering vines I've tended with my own hands, I am simply a woman who finds peace in the turning of seasons, in the patient work of coaxing beauty from the earth. I settle onto the stone bench beneath the fig tree, the same spot where I've come each morning for the past 3 years. The marble is cool against my palms, smoothed by countless hands before mine. My grandmother sat here, her grandmother before that, women who understood that sometimes the most radical act is simply continuing, creating beauty in the midst of destruction. The sound of voices drifts over the garden wall, merchants calling their wares, children laughing as they chase each other through the narrow streets. Life persists, as it always has, even as the very foundations of our republic strain and crack beneath the weight of ambition and fear. Father returned late last night from another endless session in the Senate. I heard his footsteps in the atrium, heavier than usual, accompanied by the low murmur of urgent conversation with his closest allies. The same conversations that happen every night now. Discussions about Caesar's growing power, about the delicate balance that keeps our world from sliding into something none of us can control. But I don't come to this garden to think about Caesar. I come here to think about Marcus. Marcus Junius Brutus. Even his name feels different when I allow myself to say it quietly, here where no one can see the way my expression softens. He's been a frequent visitor to our house these past months, drawn by his respect for my father's unwavering principles. They speak for hours about philosophy, about the duties of citizenship, about the weight of legacy, and the courage required to live according to one's deepest convictions. I listen from the shadows of the peristyle, officially invisible in the way that women often are during such discussions. But Marcus has begun to notice me. Not just as Cato's daughter, not just as another piece of furniture in the political landscape of Rome. He sees me. Yesterday, as he was leaving, he paused by the garden entrance. "Your roses are particularly beautiful this year, Porcia," he said quietly. Such simple words, but the way he spoke them, as if he understood that these flowers represent something more than mere decoration, as if he recognized the intention, the hope, the quiet rebellion of creating something lovely in a world that seems determined to destroy itself. I had been cutting herbs for the kitchen, my hands fragrant with rosemary and thyme. "Beauty requires patience," I replied, not looking up from my work, "and faith that tomorrow will come." He was quiet for a long moment. When I finally raised my eyes to meet his, I saw something there that made my heart beat faster. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition, the look of someone who has also learned to find strength in small, persistent acts of creation. "Yes," he said softly, "faith that tomorrow will come." Now, in the gentle morning light, I find myself returning to that moment again and again. The way his voice carried both sadness and hope, the way his presence in this space felt right, natural, as if he belonged here among the climbing vines and sun-warmed stones. I know what people say about Marcus, that he carries the weight of his ancestry like a burden too heavy for any one man to bear. His ancestor, the first Brutus, helped establish the very republic that now struggles to survive. That legacy shapes everything Marcus does, every choice he makes. I see it in the careful way he speaks, in the measured consideration he gives to every word, every action. But I also see something else, a gentleness that he keeps carefully hidden from the public eye, a love of poetry that he reveals only to those he trusts completely. Yesterday, as we spoke in the garden, he quoted Catullus, lines about the persistence of love in the face of uncertainty. His voice carried the words as if they were precious things, fragile and beautiful and worth protecting. The sun climbs higher, warming the air and releasing the scent of lavender from the borders I planted last spring. This garden has become my own small act of faith. Each plant chosen carefully, tended patiently, trusted to grow despite the uncertainty that shadows everything else in our lives. My maid, Claudia, appears at the garden entrance with a tray of fresh bread and honey, figs still warm from the morning sun. She's been with our family since I was a child, and she understands my need for these quiet morning hours. She sets the tray on the small table beside my bench and withdraws without a word, leaving me to my thoughts and the gentle company of birdsong. As I break the bread, I think about the conversation I overheard last night between Father and his friend Bibulus. They spoke in careful, measured tones about the choices that may soon be required of all of them, about the point at which compromise becomes complicity, and principle demands action that no reasonable person would want to take. I understand more than they realize. I've been raised in this world of politics and philosophy, of competing loyalties and impossible choices. I know that the peace of this garden, the luxury of these quiet morning hours, exists only because other people are willing to make decisions that will shape the future of our world. But I also know that there are different kinds of strength, different ways of contributing to the preservation of what we hold dear. The women in my family have always understood this, the power of creating spaces where truth can be spoken, where weary souls can find rest, where the values we claim to cherish can actually be lived. A butterfly alights on the rosemary bush near my feet, its wings catching the morning light. Such a fragile thing, yet it continues its ancient dance from flower to flower, carrying out its small but essential role in the larger pattern of life. There's something profound in that persistence, something that speaks to the choices we all make about how to spend our brief time in this uncertain world. I hear footsteps approaching through the house and Claudia's voice announcing a visitor. My heart quickens as I recognize the deeper tones of the response. Marcus has come early today before the heat of the afternoon makes conversation uncomfortable. I remain seated on my bench, hands folded in my lap, but something inside me brightens like a flame, touched by a gentle breeze. Perhaps today we will speak again of poetry and patience. Perhaps today I will find the courage to share some of the thoughts that bloom in the quiet spaces of my heart, thoughts as carefully tended as any flower in this garden. The morning light continues to shift and change, painting new patterns across the stone pathways. In a few hours, this peaceful sanctuary will grow warm and drowsy with afternoon heat. But for now, in this perfect moment between dawn and day, anything seems possible. Even hope, even love, even the radical act of believing that beauty and gentleness might somehow survive whatever storms are coming. I smooth my dress and wait for Marcus to find me here among the flowers, in this place where truth feels safer than it does anywhere else in Rome. The garden holds its breath, as if it too understands that some moments are too precious to rush. The scholar and the senator. The sound of footsteps on stone paths reaches me before I see him. Marcus moves through the morning garden like a man carrying invisible weights. His shoulders set in that particular way they take when he's been wrestling with thoughts that have no easy answers. I remain still among the roses, watching as he approaches. There's something beautiful about observing someone you love when they don't know they're being seen. The careful mask he wears for the world has slipped away, leaving only the man beneath. thoughtful, troubled, achingly sincere. "You're up early," I say softly as he draws near. He startles slightly, then smiles when he sees me. "I could say the same of you." "I couldn't sleep." I gesture to the space beside me on the marble bench. Too many thoughts circling like birds that won't settle. Marcus sits, and I notice the way he moves. Careful, deliberate, as if even his body is thinking through each action. His hands are stained with ink from his midnight writing, and there are shadows beneath his eyes that speak of hours spent in contemplation. "What were you reading?" I ask, though I already know. Marcus has been spending his nights in his study, surrounded by scrolls and tablets, seeking answers in the words of philosophers long dead. "Plato," he admits, and before that, my ancestors' writings on the nature of duty. Lucius Junius Brutus, the founder of the Republic, the man who drove out the last king of Rome and established the system that Marcus now watches strain under the weight of Caesar's growing power. I understand why he turns to those ancient words. When the present feels impossible to navigate, we search for wisdom in the past. "What does he tell you?" I ask. Marcus is quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the fountain where water catches the early light. That some choices define not just a man, but generations. That there are moments when personal desire must bow to duty. He pauses, his voice growing softer, and that the weight of such moments can crush a soul if it's not strong enough to bear them. I hear the pain in his words, the way they catch slightly in his throat. Marcus feels everything so deeply. It's what makes him good, what makes him worthy of love, but it's also what tears at him when the world demands impossible choices. "And Plato?" I prompt gently. Plato speaks of justice, of the ideal state where virtue governs and power serves wisdom rather than ambition. Marcus turns to look at me, and I see the conflict written in his dark eyes. But what happens when the real world falls so far from the ideal that compromise itself becomes corruption? I know what he's really asking. Caesar grows stronger each day, gathering power like a man collecting precious stones. The old ways, the careful balance of the Republic, strain and crack under the pressure of one man's ambition. And Marcus sees it all with the clarity of someone who truly understands what's being lost. "Tell me," I say simply. So he does. In the growing warmth of morning, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the awakening garden, Marcus speaks of his fears, of watching senators bow and scrape before Caesar like courtiers before a king, of seeing the very foundations of Roman law bent to serve one man's will, of the terrible weight of carrying his ancestor's name while watching everything that name represents slowly crumble. "I lie awake at night," he confesses, wondering what Lucius Junius would do, whether he would find a way to work within the system to guide Caesar toward wisdom, or whether he would see compromise itself as betrayal. I listen without judgment, letting him pour out the thoughts that have been poisoning his sleep. This is what love means, sometimes. Simply being present for another's pain without trying to fix or minimize it. Yesterday, in the Senate, Marcus continues, Caesar barely listened to the debate before announcing his decision, as if our voices, our votes, were merely theater for his amusement. His hands clenched slightly in his lap, and we all sat there. We all let it happen. The anguish in his voice makes my chest tighten. I've watched this struggle consume him for months now, the slow erosion of his faith in the system he was raised to serve. "What do you think you should do?" I ask carefully. Marcus looks at me with something like surprise. "You're not going to tell me what's right." I almost smile at that. "When have I ever told you what to think, Marcus Brutus?" "Never," he admits. "It's one of the things He stops, color rising in his cheeks. "One of the things you what?" "One of the things I love about you," he says quietly. The words hang in the air between us like morning mist, beautiful and fragile and transformative. We've danced around this feeling for months, but hearing it spoken aloud changes something fundamental. "I love that you trust me to find my own answers," he continues, "that you see me as capable of wisdom rather than someone who needs to be managed or directed." I think of all the women I know who spend their lives managing the men around them, smoothing their tempers, anticipating their needs, becoming smaller so the men can feel larger. It's exhausting work, and it leaves no room for our own thoughts, our own growth. "I've seen too many brilliant women disappear into other people's lives," I tell him, "and too many good men weakened by being treated like children who can't think for themselves." Marcus nods slowly. "My mother still tries to choose my clothes," he says with rueful humor. "And does it help you become the man you want to be? It makes me feel like I'm still 12 years old." We sit in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the garden come alive around us. A butterfly lands on the roses near my hand, delicate, purposeful, unafraid. "I want to be worthy of this," Marcus says suddenly. "Of you, of the trust you're placing in me by not trying to push me toward any particular choice." "You already are worthy," I tell him. "The fact that you're wrestling with these questions, that you're not content to simply go along with whatever's easiest, that makes you worthy." "Even if I make the wrong choice?" "Especially then." I turn to face him fully. Anyone can make the right choice when it's obvious, but to struggle with impossible decisions, to lose sleep over doing what's right, even when you're not sure what that is, that's what integrity looks like, Marcus. He reaches for my hand then, his fingers warm and slightly trembling. I don't know what I'm going to do about Caesar, about any of it. You don't have to know yet, but I will have to decide. Eventually. Yes, I agree. Eventually. But not this morning. The sun has climbed higher now, painting the garden in shades of gold and green. Soon the day will claim us both. Marcus to his duties in the forum, me to the endless small tasks that fill a woman's hours. But for now, we have this moment of honesty, this space where uncertainty doesn't feel like failure. "Thank you," Marcus says softly. "For what?" "For seeing me, for trusting me, for not trying to make my choices for me." I squeeze his hand gently. "Thank you for letting me. In years to come, I will remember this morning." The weight of his hand in mine, the way the light caught the water in the fountain, the sound of his voice when he first said he loved me. I will remember it when the choices become clear and terrible, when duty and love pull in opposite directions, when the world demands more than any one person should have to give. But that's still ahead of us, hidden in the uncertain future. This morning there is only truth and trust and the radical act of loving someone enough to let them find their own way. Simple moments growing love. The days that follow blur together like watercolors in rain, each one bleeding into the next with the gentle rhythm of a life shared. There's something almost sacred about the ordinary moments we begin to weave together, Marcus and I. The way he reaches for my hand without thinking as we walk through the market. How I've learned to read the subtle shift in his shoulders when the weight of the world presses too heavily upon him. This morning I wake before dawn to find him already dressed, standing at the window of his chambers where I've taken to spending my nights. The early light catches the silver threading through his dark hair, and I think how young he still looks when he sleeps, how the lines of worry smooth away in dreams. "You're thinking too loudly," I murmur, not moving from the warmth of the bed. He turns and his smile is soft, unguarded. "I was thinking about bread." "Bread?" I sit up, pulling the sheet around my shoulders. That's surprisingly practical for a philosopher. The baker's wife mentioned yesterday that grain shipments are delayed again, third time this month. He moves to sit beside me, his hand finding mine automatically. Caesar's new policies. They sound generous in the Senate. Free grain for the people, expanded citizenship, grand building projects. But someone has to pay for generosity on such a scale. I study his face, the way his jaw tightens when he speaks of Caesar now. And I think a man who gives away what isn't his to give is buying something more valuable than bread. The question is, what price will all pay when the bill comes due? There it is again, that shadow that falls across our happiness whenever the world intrudes. But I've learned something in these weeks of loving Marcus Brutus. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply to live fully in spite of the darkness gathering at the edges. Well then, I say, slipping from the bed and reaching for my stola, let's go buy bread while we still can, and olives, and that honey you love. Let's make a feast of this ordinary morning. His laughter follows me as I dress, and I think how rare that sound has become in Rome lately. How precious. The market is already bustling when we arrive, though the sun has barely cleared the hills. I watch Marcus move through the crowd, noting how people's eyes follow him, some with respect, others with something harder to read. He carries his lineage like a visible thing, the weight of being descended from the Brutus who founded the Republic. Sometimes I wonder if he ever gets to simply be Marcus, not a symbol, not a legacy, just a man who likes honey and philosophical debates and the way morning light falls across garden stones. Porcia. A woman's voice pulls me from my thoughts. I turn to see Calpurnia, Caesar's wife, approaching with her small retinue. Her smile is genuine but tired, and I recognize something in her eyes that mirrors what I see in my own reflection lately, the particular exhaustion of loving a man whose choices shape the world. Calpurnia, how lovely to see you. We embrace briefly, and she holds my hands a moment longer than custom requires. I've been meaning to visit, she says quietly. These days, it feels important to maintain friendships that existed before all this political madness. Before? I ask gently, though I know what she means. Before our husbands became pieces on opposite sides of the board. Her voice is barely above a whisper. I dream of storms lately, Portia. Dark omens. Julius laughs, but... She glances toward where Marcus stands examining pottery with the serious attention he brings to everything. Does he speak to you of what's coming? The question hangs between us like incense smoke, heavy and lingering. He speaks to me of philosophy, of honor, of the difficulty of knowing what's right when all the choices lead to pain. She nods slowly. Yes, they're all so certain, our husbands, so sure they know what Rome needs. But certainty is a luxury women can't afford, isn't it? We see the cost of their convictions written in blood and tears. Calpurnia, I begin, but she's already stepping back, her public mask sliding into place as her attendants move closer. Give my regards to your father, she says, louder now. And to Marcus. Tell him that some of us remember when Romans could disagree without reaching for daggers. She's gone before I can respond, swept away by her guards and the crowd's natural deference to Caesar's wife. But her words echo as Marcus returns to my side, his arms full of our morning's purchases. Was that Calpurnia? He asks, scanning the crowd where she's disappeared. Yes, she sends her regards. I take some of the packages from him, noting the tension that's crept into his posture. She seems troubled. We're all troubled these days. His voice is carefully neutral, but I know him well enough now to hear the undercurrent. The question is whether we're troubled enough to act. We walk home in relative silence, the easy joy of the morning shadowed by that brief encounter. It strikes me how quickly the outside world can intrude on our private happiness, how thin the walls are between love and politics in a city where power is everything. Back in his house, I set about preparing our simple feast while Marcus tends to correspondence that arrived while we were out. I can hear him in the next room, his voice low as he dictates responses to his secretary. Something about Senate meetings, about gathering support for something. I don't listen too closely. There will be time enough for that conversation later. Instead, I focus on the immediate pleasure of arranging food on plates, of choosing the right wine, of creating a small island of beauty in our uncertain world. This, too, is a kind of power, the ability to make a home, to offer comfort, to insist on grace even when the world seems determined to abandon it. When Marcus joins me, the furrow between his brows has deepened, but he sets his worries aside with visible effort, settling beside me on the low couch we've pulled near the window. "Tell me something that has nothing to do with Rome," he says, breaking bread with hands that are steadier than his voice. "Tell me about your dreams, your childhood, the person you were before the world taught you to be careful." So I do. I tell him about climbing olive trees as a girl, about the time I convinced my father's secretary to teach me rhetoric by arguing that Cato's daughter should be able to defend his positions as well as any son, about the garden I plan to plant when this strange season of our lives passes, assuming it passes. "What will you grow?" he asks, and there's something almost desperate in the way he focuses on this simple question. "Roses," I say without hesitation. "Red ones for passion, white ones for new beginnings, and herbs. Basil for love, rosemary for remembrance." I pause, studying his face. "What would you plant if you could grow anything?" "Peace," he says immediately, then laughs at his own earnestness. Failing that, olive trees. Something that takes decades to mature. Something that assumes we'll have decades to wait. The weight of that assumption settles between us like a prayer offered to uncertain gods. Whispers in the Forum. That evening, as oil lamps flicker against the growing darkness, I notice how Marcus moves differently through our home. His steps are measured, deliberate, as if he's walking through a world that might shift beneath his feet at any moment. The way he pauses at doorways, the way his hand lingers on familiar objects. A man memorizing what he loves. "Cassius came to see me today," he says quietly, settling beside me on our simple wooden bench. The words fall between us like stones dropped into still water. I don't ask what Cassius wanted. I already know. Everyone in Rome knows, even if we don't speak it aloud. The Republic bleeds while Caesar grows stronger, and men like my husband, men who carry the weight of their ancestors' honor, they feel every drop. "What did you tell him?" I ask instead, my fingers finding his in the lamplight. That I needed time to think. Marcus turns my hand over in his, tracing the lines on my palm as if reading prophecies there. He speaks of duty, of what we owe to Rome. And what do you think we owe to Rome? The question hangs in the air between us. Outside, the city settles into its evening rhythms. Vendors calling their final wares, children being summoned home, the distant sound of wheels on stone. All of it so ordinary, so precious in its ordinariness. "Everything," he whispers, "and nothing. How can both be true?" I lean against his shoulder, feeling the tension coiled in his muscles like rope pulled taut. "Tell me what frightens you most." He's quiet for so long, I think he won't answer. Then, that I'll choose wrong. That history will judge me a coward or a traitor. That you'll wake up one morning married to a man you can no longer recognize. Marcus. I turn to face him fully, my hands framing his worried face. I didn't fall in love with your reputation. I fell in love with your heart, with the way you see the world, the way you carry its pain as if it were your own. Sometimes I think you see me more clearly than I see myself. Perhaps that's what love is, I say softly, holding up a mirror that shows not just what is, but what could be. The next morning brings news that Caesar has called for another public celebration. More spectacle, more displays of power that make even his supporters shift uncomfortably. I watch Marcus read the announcement, see the way his jaw tightens. He grows bolder, I observe, setting bread and honey before him. Or more desperate. Marcus looks up from the scroll. Power that must constantly prove itself. Perhaps it's not as secure as it appears. I pour wine mixed with water, the domestic ritual grounding us both. The women at the market whisper different stories now. Fear changes the shape of gossip. What do they say? That their husbands come home angry, that senators avoid the forum unless summoned, that even Caesar's friends speak in careful half-sentences. I sit across from him, noting how he tears his bread into smaller and smaller pieces without eating, that wives wake in the night to find their husbands staring at the ceiling, wrestling with invisible demons. He meets my eyes then, and I see my own fears reflected there. We're balanced on the edge of something vast and unknowable, and neither of us can see the bottom. Portia, if difficult times come, if choices must be made that put us in danger, then we'll face them together. The certainty in my own voice surprises me. I'm not some delicate flower that wilts at the first storm, Marcus. I'm Cato's daughter. I chose you knowing exactly who you are and what that might cost. You don't know what you're saying, don't I? I reach across the table, covering his restless hands with mine. You think I haven't watched the shadows growing longer? You think I don't see how Cassius looks at you? How other men defer to your opinion even when you haven't spoken? You think I married you believing we'd live a quiet, simple life? He stares at me as if seeing something unexpected, something that both relieves and terrifies him. I knew, I continue quietly. From that first day in the garden, I knew you carried Rome's future in your bones. I chose that burden too, Marcus. It's not yours alone. That afternoon, while Marcus meets with senators whose names he doesn't share, I tend our small garden with unusual intensity. Each plant receives careful attention, watering, pruning, the gentle removal of spent blooms. As if by nurturing these small, growing things, I can somehow influence the larger forces threatening to uproot our world. The basil has grown thick and fragrant. I pinch off flowering tops, encouraging the leaves to stay tender. Such a simple act. Such faith in tomorrow's meals. The rosemary spreads wider each week, its woody stems reaching toward the sun with stubborn persistence. For remembrance, I whisper to its silvery leaves, whatever comes, I want to remember this. The weight of warm earth in my hands, the scent of herbs crushed between my fingers, the ordinary miracle of things that choose to grow despite uncertainty. A shadow falls across the garden. I look up to find Servilia, Brutus's mother, watching me with eyes that miss nothing. You work in your garden as if preparing for siege, she observes, settling beside me on the stone border. Perhaps I am. I don't stop my careful tending, though I'm not sure whether I'm fortifying against what's coming or what I'm afraid might be lost. You know about the meetings. It's not a question. Servilia has survived decades of Roman politics by understanding which winds carry truth and which carry mere rumor. I know my husband struggles with impossible choices, I say carefully. I know good men see different paths forward, and all of them lead through darkness. And if that darkness touches you directly, I sit back on my heels, really looking at her now. Caesar's former lover, Brutus's mother, a woman who has navigated the treacherous currents of power longer than I've been alive. What is she really asking? Then I'll learn to see by different light, I answer finally. Love doesn't guarantee safety, Servilia. It only guarantees that whatever comes, we don't face it alone. She nods slowly as if I've passed some test I didn't know I was taking. He's fortunate in his choice, she says, rising to leave. See that fortune doesn't make him careless. As her footsteps fade, I return to my plants with hands that shake slightly. The conversation felt like a warning, or a blessing, perhaps both. When Marcus returns that evening, his face tells me everything before he speaks a word. The meetings have crystallized something, sharpened choices that were once theoretical into immediate, pressing realities. It's moving faster now, he says simply. How fast? Fast enough that we need to speak of practical things, of what you'll do if I'm no longer here to protect you. The words hit like cold water, but I keep my voice steady. Where would you go? I don't know yet, but Portia, whatever happens in the coming days, remember that every choice I make carries your face, your voice, the future we dreamed of in this garden. I go to him then, wrapping my arms around his rigid frame, feeling him gradually soften into the embrace. Tomorrow will bring what it brings. Tonight, we still have the warmth of familiar bodies, the scent of herbs drifting through open windows, the precious weight of love that chooses to bloom even as storms gather on every horizon. Then let's tend our dreams a little longer, I whisper against his chest, while we still can. The proof of loyalty. But even as we hold each other in the gathering dusk, I feel the tremor in his hands, the way his breathing catches when he thinks I'm not listening. Something more than political philosophy weighs on him now, something that makes him start at unexpected sounds, that draws his gaze constantly toward the door as if expecting or dreading visitors. The next morning, I watch him dress with unusual care. His movements are deliberate, almost ritualistic, as he adjusts his toga and checks the small knife he always carries. When he thinks I'm not watching, I catch him staring at his reflection in the polished bronze mirror, as if memorizing his own face. You're going to see them again, I say quietly. It's not a question. He freezes, his hand halfway to the door latch. Portia. The men who come at night, who speak in whispers and leave by different routes. I rise from our bed, wrapping my stola around me like armor. Do you think I don't notice? Do you think I sleep so soundly that I miss the soft knock at the gate, the hushed voices in your study? He turns to face me, and I see something I've never seen before in his eyes. Fear. Not of death, but of losing me. There are things, he says slowly, that are better left unknown, for your protection. My protection. The words taste bitter. Marcus, I am Cato's daughter. I chose to love a man who carries the weight of Rome's future in his conscience. Do you think I need protection from truth? He's quiet for so long, I wonder if he'll answer at all. When he does speak, his voice is barely above a whisper. If you knew, if you truly understood what we're contemplating, you might not be able to look at me the same way. I cross the room slowly, my bare feet silent on the cool tiles. Outside, the morning birds are beginning their songs, and the first merchants are calling their wares in the street. Normal sounds of a normal day, but nothing about this moment feels normal. Try me, I say simply. But he shakes his head, the movement sharp with pain. I cannot. I will not make you complicit in... He stops, as if the words themselves are dangerous. And suddenly, I understand. This isn't about protecting me from knowledge. This is about protecting himself from doubt, from the possibility that if he speaks his plans aloud, if he sees them reflected in my eyes, he might lose his resolve. The realization settles into my bones like winter cold. Whatever they're planning, it's irrevocable. The kind of action that divides a life into before and after, that changes not just the actor, but everyone who loves them. You don't trust me, I say. That's not... He reaches for me, but I step back. You don't trust that I'm strong enough, that my love is deep enough, that I can bear the weight of whatever truth you're carrying. Porcia, please. But I'm already moving, my mind sharp with sudden clarity. In the small alcove where we keep our household shrine, there's a bronze stylus I use for my correspondence. I pick it up, feeling its familiar weight, its pointed tip designed for pressing letters into wax. What are you doing? I don't answer. Instead, I gather my courage like a cloak around me and press the stylus deep into the flesh of my thigh. The pain is immediate, bright and clean, but I don't cry out. I don't even flinch. Blood wells up around the bronze point, staining the white fabric of my stola. Porcia! Marcus lunges toward me, but I hold up my free hand to stop him. No, I say, my voice steady despite the fire spreading down my leg. Watch. See what your wife is made of. I hold the stylus in place, letting the pain wash through me in waves. It's nothing compared to the ache of being shut out, of being deemed too fragile for truth. I count my heartbeats. 10, 20, 30. While Marcus stares at me with something between horror and awe. A weak woman, I say conversationally, as if we're discussing the weather, would scream now, would faint, would beg for help. I pull the stylus free and set it carefully on the shrine, my movements deliberate and controlled. Do I seem weak to you, husband? Blood flows freely now, but I don't tend to it. Instead, I meet his eyes directly, letting him see the steel beneath my softness, the fire that burns at my core. If I can bear this pain in silence, I continue, if I can wound myself and stand steady while my own blood pools at my feet, do you think there's any truth you could tell me that would break me? Marcus sinks onto the edge of our bed as if his legs will no longer hold him. His face has gone pale, but his eyes are blazing with something that looks like recognition. You magnificent, impossible woman, he whispers. I am your wife, I correct gently, your partner, your equal. Not some delicate flower to be protected from storms. I move closer, ignoring the pain that shoots through my leg with each step. I married Marcus Junius Brutus, knowing exactly who he was, knowing the blood that runs in his veins, the legacy he carries, the impossible choices he might one day face. I kneel beside him, taking his hands in mine. My blood stains his fingers, but he doesn't pull away. Whatever you and your friends are planning, I say quietly, I already know it will be dangerous. I already know it will change everything. I already know that loving you means accepting that risk. I lean closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. The only thing I can't accept is being shut out, being treated as if my love is conditional, as if it depends on ignorance. For a long moment, we sit in silence. The wound in my leg throbs with each heartbeat, but the pain is distant now, secondary to the intensity of his gaze. Caesar, he says finally, the name falling between us like a stone into still water. I nod, unsurprised. Yes, we believe, we know, that he means to crown himself king, to end the Republic forever. And you mean to stop him. We mean to kill him. The words hang in the air like incense, heavy and sacred and terrible. I let them settle into my understanding, feeling their weight, their finality. When? I ask. The Ides of Martius, in the Senate House. How many of you? Enough. Too many to turn back now, even if we wanted to. I reach up to touch his face, my fingers tracing the familiar lines of his jaw. And do you want to turn back? He closes his eyes, leaning into my touch. Every day, every hour. But then I think of what Rome will become under a king, what our children would inherit, and I know we have no choice. "Then neither do I," I say simply. He opens his eyes, searching my face. "You're not afraid?" "Terrified," I admit, but not of the truth. Never of the truth. Slowly, carefully, he helps me tend to the wound I've given myself. His hands are gentle as he cleans the blood away, as he binds the cut with strips of clean linen. But there's something different in his touch now. A new respect, a deeper recognition. "No more secrets," he promises against my hair. "No more secrets," I agree. And for the first time in weeks, when he holds me, I feel him truly relax into my arms. Before Philippi, but that was 2 years ago now. 2 years since the Ides of March changed everything, since Marcus became one of Caesar's assassins, since we fled Rome together into an uncertain exile that has led us here to the plains of Macedonia, where 2 armies prepare to decide the fate of the Republic. I am no longer in my garden in Rome. Those peaceful mornings feel like another lifetime, another woman's memories. Now I sit in a modest villa in Athens, watching the olive trees bend in the autumn wind, waiting for word from a battlefield I pray I will never see. Marcus left 3 days ago to join Cassius and their legions, the last liberators of Rome, they call themselves, the last defenders of the Republic against Octavian and Antony's pursuit of power. But I know what they really are. They are the last of something dying, something beautiful that the world has decided it no longer wants. The letter in my hands arrived this morning, his handwriting so familiar I could trace each stroke with my eyes closed. The ink is slightly smudged, from rain perhaps, or perhaps from tears. "My dearest Portia," he writes, "tomorrow we face them at Philippi. Cassius believes we have the advantage of position. Our men are well prepared, well supplied. The omens." Here there's a pause in the writing, as if he set down his stylus and picked it up again. "The omens are unclear, but then they always are when we most need their guidance." I fold the letter carefully, smoothing each crease. Outside, the wind picks up, sending leaves skittering across the courtyard stones. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, a sound so ordinary, so peaceful, that it makes my chest ache. How strange that life continues its small rhythms while everything we've built hangs in the balance. The servants still prepare meals. The merchants still call their wares in the agora. Children still play in the streets, their laughter carrying on the same wind that brings news of armies gathering, of the Republic's final stand. I unfold the letter again, reading his words more slowly this time. "Do you remember," he continues, "that morning in our garden when you asked me about duty, about whether it was possible to serve Rome and still choose love? I told you then that I didn't know, that I was still learning to balance the weight of both. I do remember. It was early spring, the roses just beginning to bud. He'd been reading Cicero's letters, growing more troubled with each page. I'd found him sitting on the stone bench, staring at nothing, and I'd asked him what it meant to be a Roman, whether we were bound by our ancestors' choices or free to make our own. I think I understand now." His letter goes on. "Duty without love is hollow, but love without the courage to act. Love that asks us to turn away from what we know is right. That isn't love at all, it's fear wearing love's face." I set the letter down and walk to the window. Athens spreads below me, golden in the afternoon light. This city that gave birth to democracy, that taught Rome what it meant to be a republic, it feels like a fitting place to wait while the last act of that great experiment plays out on a distant field. The irony isn't lost on me. I proved my strength to Marcus by wounding myself, by showing him I could bear any truth. But this waiting while he faces death for principles we both believe in, this is a different kind of wound entirely, one that can't be bound with linen, can't be healed with gentle hands. I return to his letter, to the final paragraph I've been avoiding. Whatever happens tomorrow, know this. Every choice I've made since that first morning in your garden has been made easier by your love. You showed me that strength and tenderness aren't opposites, that a man can be both a warrior and a gardener, both a Roman and simply himself. My hands are shaking now. I press them flat against my knees, willing them to be still. If I don't return, he writes, plant roses, red ones like the ones we tended together. Let them grow wild if they want to. Let them cover everything. And when people ask you about Marcus Brutus, tell them he was a man who loved his wife's garden more than his own glory, but who chose glory anyway, because some things matter more than happiness. The letter ends there, except for his name, written larger than usual, as if he wanted to leave more of himself on the page. I fold it one final time and hold it against my chest. Through the thin papyrus, I can almost feel his heartbeat, steady and strong as it was that night when I cut myself to prove my courage, when he finally told me about Caesar, when we promised each other no more secrets. But there's one secret I've kept from him, one truth I couldn't bear to write in my letters as he marched toward this battle. The physicians confirmed it just after he left. I carry his child, a son or daughter, who will grow up in whatever world emerges from tomorrow's clash of armies. I place my hand over my still flat belly and whisper the words I couldn't say in farewell. Come back to us, please. Just come back. Outside, the sun is setting, painting the sky the color of roses. Somewhere to the north, Marcus is watching the same sunset, perhaps thinking of our garden, of the life we built together in those brief, precious years before duty called him away. Tomorrow will bring word, victory or defeat, his return or my widowhood. But tonight, in this quiet villa with his letter in my hands and his child growing beneath my heart, I choose to remember only love. A letter from the front. 3 days later, another letter arrives. The messenger's face tells me everything before I break the seal. This will be the last. My beloved Porcia. If you are reading this, then Cassius and I march tomorrow toward whatever fate awaits us. The enemy draws near, and I confess. I am no longer certain of victory, but I am certain of this. Loving you has been the greatest honor of my life. Do you remember that morning in our garden when you asked what I would choose if I could live any life at all? I said I would choose to be a simple man who grows roses with his wife. I meant it then. I mean it still. You gave me something I never expected to find. In a world of shifting loyalties and hollow words, you were truth itself. When you proved your strength with that blade, when you demanded to share my burdens, you showed me what courage truly looks like. I know you carry more than grief now. A woman doesn't hide such news unless she fears it might break the man she loves. But darling, nothing could bring me greater joy than knowing part of us will continue, whatever happens here. If I do not return, do not let our child grow up thinking their father chose duty over love. I chose both, because you taught me they need not be enemies. Raise them in gardens. Teach them that beauty is the most radical act of all. The sun sets now over this foreign field, and I think of you watching the same light fade over Athens. We are not so far apart. Not really. Love transcends distance, transcends even death. Find peace, my darling. Find joy. When our child asks about their father, tell them I died believing in tomorrow, believing in the world we tried to build together. All my love, always Marcus. I fold the letter carefully, my hands trembling only slightly. Outside, the first stars appear, the same ones that shine over his camp tonight. Whatever tomorrow brings, we had this. We had love that burned bright enough to light the darkness. That will have to be enough. Echoes in the garden. Years pass like shadows across marble, and I find myself walking through what remains of our Roman garden. The olive tree has grown wild, its branches reaching toward a sky that remembers our whispered promises. Weeds have claimed the paths where Marcus and I once walked hand in hand, discussing philosophy and dreams of tomorrow. Our son plays among the overgrown herbs, his laughter echoing off the weathered stones. And for a moment, I see Marcus in the way he tilts his head, the way he pauses to examine a flower with such careful attention. The child knows his father only through stories, through letters I read aloud on quiet evenings, through the way I describe honor and love as inseparable things. The fountain still murmurs its ancient song, though moss now softens its edges. I trace the carved inscription Marcus left there, for Porcia, who taught me that courage blooms in quiet moments. The words have weathered but not disappeared, like love itself, enduring beyond the bodies that first felt its fire. Sometimes visitors come, asking about the conspiracy, about Caesar's assassination, about the battles that followed. They want dramatic tales of political intrigue, but I tell them instead about morning conversations over bread and honey, about hands that were gentle even when they carried the weight of Rome's future, about a love that chose truth over comfort, again and again. The garden teaches patience, teaches that some things grow more beautiful in their wild abandon than they ever were when carefully tended. The roses climb higher now, reaching toward light without human guidance, blooming fierce and free. As twilight settles over the ancient stones and our sun gathers the last of the day's treasures, I understand finally that this is how love survives the end of everything. Not in grand gestures or marble monuments, but in the quiet passing down of stories, in the way we choose to remember, in gardens that bloom long after the gardeners have returned to earth, in children who carry forward the best of what came before, in the eternal conversation between what was and what might yet be,